Welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. Well, the University Grants Commission notification that higher educational institutions once selected for being developed into world-class universities shall be freed of regulatory clutches is a public admission that regulation is a major stumbling block in promoting excellence in education. The idea is further reinforced by the Ministry of Human Resource Development moving to significantly reduce its involvement in the constitution of the IIM board and the selection and appointment of their chairperson and directors. Worrying as these may sound in view of the long-held belief that higher education is too important to be left to the whims of the market forces and that regulations are supposed to set norms and standards to ensure quality and promote excellence, the harsh realities on the ground leave one with very few options. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze if regulators in higher education should be done away with. Joining me on the program today are Dr. Rakesh Batabyal, Associate Professor, JNU, Professor Rajvir Sharma, RSS thinker, Sushma Yadav, Professor of Public Policy and Governance and member UGC, and Professor Apoorvanand, Department of Hindi, University of Delhi. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Professor Batabyal, I'd like to start with you and begin with your opening remarks on the program today.
You see, regulation is required no matter which society we are talking about. China, for example, which actually is setting the model for all of us now, because China is a country which has leapfrogged in higher education, where we're talking on management, engineering, on social science and humanity. There, the regulation is, I think, the biggest body. In fact, the party controls the country and party controls even the university. So it's a chimera to say that there is no regulation and therefore some excellence is coming. So regulation is important. Now, who regulates is the question that we should be asking, not only in this meeting, but across the country. What increasingly has been happening is that it is the capital which is regulating rather than those who are producing knowledge. So in a way, this is a big tussle where the capital, in a way that it is now assuming a form, it wants to done away with regulation where it wants to keep regulation where it wants. So therefore, it has to be very seriously discussed as to why and who is controlling universities. We have, over the last, say, 1950s to 1990s, if we have progressed and developed all the sciences that we actually boast every day, it is done with the same regulatory institution that we have, the same UGC. So why we are talking about doing away with those regulatory systems that we have? That means something has crept in those institutions, first. And secondly, in the new situation, primarily with the new economy, new kind of global situation, economic primarily, and the kind of capital and the capitalist class that we have now, they want a different kind of institution. Therefore, you can see the discrepancy when they talk about engineering or management institution, they have a different attitude.
Right.
When they talk about the critical institutions like social sciences or humanities, they have a different system, the different understanding. Therefore, the idea that regulators should be there or not is not a question. What kind of regulatory system that we should have, whether it facilitates or it curbs. We want facilitating regulatory system, and UGC has over the years, primarily from 53 on, done tremendous amount of work,
right,
as working as a buffer between the ministry and the state and the teaching community which produces knowledge. Now, the same regulator is generally seen as curbing the teachers or the creative universe in the country.
Fair enough. Okay.
And that's why this demand for doing away has been voiced, or in fact put in from some quarters which have its own vested interest.
Professor Yadav, as a member of the UGC, would you agree with that, that the UGC is curbing the faculty or the teaching facility as a whole and is not allowing them to grow and blossom and do their job as is being suggested by Professor Batabyal?
No, I wouldn't agree with that, because what has developed over the years in the country is, of course, largely due to a system which supports them, and UGC has been overlooking, regulating, but facilitating also. It provides funds. Funds are not merely regulatory things. The only thing in India which has developed over the years, and there I think I would also not agree with Professor Batabyal, because the state tried to regulate this education system till now. And the example that he's giving is a state which is excelling is China, where there's a lot of regulation. So regulation and facilitation and quality and excellence have a very complex relationship. You don't really have systems which are excellent. The West, which was developing till now, they were all controlled by capitals. It was not any state or charity which was controlling them. Of course, capital was very much there, and capitalist interests were also there. Interest will always be there in education system because that naturally provides or produces knowledge. But I think we have to take a very careful stand. Regulations everywhere have become bottlenecks because if it is a fair regulator, it will not be a bottleneck. But I have seen in India, and I'm sure my friends will agree, all regulators tend to become regulators in terms of curbing the autonomy, curbing the choices, curbing the scope of thinking and producing knowledge. And in that process, they also tend to produce systems which are dishonest and unfair. It is that part of regulation which is harmful for any growth of knowledge or education, for that matter, or
That's
autonomy there.
very well analyzed and very rightly put. Professor Apoorvanand, how do we change all of this? How do we take this forward? How do we ensure that, these bottlenecks are not created in the future?
First of all, we have to recognize that autonomy is a precondition for excellence, and it's not a reward. What we have been doing is making autonomy a reward for excellence. So you would give autonomy to a select group of institutions and not all. Whereas I think universities and higher education institutions should be self-regulating entities. That is what Yashpal committee had mooted, that they need to be self-regulating entities. Now we are in a very farcical situation. The University Grant Commission has issued a dictate that all over the country you will have a uniform curriculum and syllabus. Only 20% of the content would be decided by their respective institutions. This is over-regulation. Now, universities don't have autonomy to decide what kind of faculty they can appoint, whether they need at a certain point of time 3 professors or 5 professors. So you have a formula, and you cannot violate or you cannot transgress that formula. That, I think, violates the principle of autonomy. And if you don't give autonomy to institutions of higher education, and if you look at universities worldwide, you would find that universities which are doing good are self-regulating entities, and they don't have an overarching, overlooking big brother watching over them, telling them how many people to appoint, what would be the space of specification of the classroom that you are going to build, and sending monitoring teams every 3 years or 5 years. So that is, and we are, again, as I said, that we are in a very farcical situation, because every now and then you have circular from MHRD, celebrate this day and that day, erect a wall of patriot, and on the other hand you say that we are going to have a set of institutions which would be free of regulation. So I think we need to deal with this farce first.
Sure, fair enough. Professor Sharma, do you believe that regulators somewhere have lost the plot by getting into micromanagement and getting into the smaller aspects of it rather than looking at the bigger picture of excellence?
Well, I would look at this issue a bit differently. Firstly, I would like to say that the presence of the regulator or absence of the regulator is no guarantee either of improving the excellence of the education system or ruining the excellence of the education system. I am saying so because if you go back into the history, and if you look at the NIRF, the list of the best institutions, 100 ones, then you'll find that the institutions, the universities which were established before or up to 1925, when there was no regulator at all, no regulator existed. And out of those 23 universities that were set up before 1925, 57% of them find a place in the top 100
Yes.
institutions. And when you had only a kind of a very loose coordinator in the form of inter-university board, which was set up in 1925, after 1925 or 1926 and up to 1957, if you look at these 3 decades, then you'll find 37 universities were more added. And out of these 37 universities, only 41% figure in the list of NIRF. That is 100.
Top 100, yes.
Top 100. Now, if you proceed further, 1956 UGC came into being. And from 1956 to 1992, you know, hundreds of universities emerged. If I am to be certain, 150, I think, universities came up to 1992. And out of that, 38 universities only find a place in the top 100 of the NIRF. So as the regulator emerged, the quality of education and quality of the institutions declined. But at the same time, it may not be true to say that it is merely because of the regulator that the quality declined, maybe the mushrooming. And another very contradictory, you know, it has to be very seriously debated. The contradiction is that when the governments, whether it is A government or B government or C government, when they talk to give autonomy to the colleges, there's a hue and cry. No, we don't want autonomy. This will create problems. So they talk of the autonomy to the universities. Now, what kind of autonomy? Autonomy is in terms of contents, faculty. And if the faculty is not recruited by the university, I don't think it is the fault of the regulator as much as the university itself is.
Right.
So this is one aspect which I wanted to say. And secondly, the regulators themselves are now admitting, now multiple, it's not UGC alone.
Yeah.
Now you have AICTE, now you have NCTE, you have the Medical Council of India, you have the Bar Council of India. You have so many professional regulators as well, right? Those who are regulating the law education, those who are regulating the other educations. And you also know that what happened some time back to the Medical Council of India.
Yeah.
The problem is not with the structure. The problem is how do you operate and who operates.
Should I add to?
Yes, please.
I'll rather support what Professor Sharma is saying. It's multiplicity of regulators and also not letting university function the way they should. For example, if the Central University of Bihar introduces a course in education, there is NCTE which would give its permission to launch it. Now all the students who have taken that course are in limbo. Where do they go?
Right.
So universities are not free. For a second, all regulators, they are not in consonance with each other. So they don't know what the other regulator is doing. And professional bodies are trying to control education, which again is a problem. Because MCI, Medical Council of India, or Bar Council of India, they try to control what would be taught in universities.
No,
that I think
I would also add to what Professor Apoorvanand was saying, that you know, even autonomy in itself, for the sake of autonomy, may not be able to deliver what we expect in terms of excellence. Now, if you look at the universities that have come after 1992, when multiple regulators are there, only 2% of the private universities are finding a place in the NIRF. Right? The deemed to be universities are also not faring very well, who are enjoying much more autonomy than the public sector universities. Now the point is that many a time it depends the institutions that are running. For example, in universities you have so many structures.
Right.
You have academic council, you have executive council, you have university court, and you have the faculties, you have the social science faculty, for example, you have the department. What will you do if you don't revise your courses? Nobody stops you to revise your courses every 5 years. How do you blame the regulator?
Fair enough.
You see, if you are not revising your course every 5 years, where the knowledge in fact is fast changing, and then you blame the regulator.
Fair
I
enough.
think this will not be good.
Professor Yadav, going by the figures that Professor Sharma has thrown at us, would you say that the UGC has been a stumbling block then somewhere down the Also, I want to ask you another question as well. You know, we've spoken about multiple regulators being in the frame and how one regulator is not on the same page as the other. So then do we need a single regulatory body?
I think regulators surely be the least. And most of the professional bodies who acted like regulators here have surely failed in providing standards and parameters and benchmarks. Rather, they have imposed maybe at times their agendas, maybe at times what was told to them to do, or maybe some personal whims and fancies. And we've seen how they have fared. But I think when we fail in self-regulation, the regulator is required. And going by the data which Professor Rajvir Sharma has so well put before us, I would go to the farce that Apoorvanand mentioned. I won't say it is a farce. The farce is much more when we say we would be self-regulated, but we fail in self-regulation. When we say that we want autonomy, but we don't use the autonomy. If your autonomy takes you to deterioration, then I think you have to introspect. So self-regulation, self-introspection is required. I'm sure all of us are from this discipline, which is teachers. And we've gone to universities, even I have gone. And I'm sure some kind of regulation is required because there are big infrastructures, big bodies erected, but the software, that is the teachers and the students, are not updated. I don't think UGC stops a university, except some central universities maybe who are in direct touch. The state universities are just not filling up the positions. UGC doesn't stop them. The state departments or the state governments don't allow them. It's not a very simple question of UGC regulating them.
Yeah.
But it's much more complex, and I think the system must address that. And maybe if there is, since we put education in concurrent, it becomes all the more difficult. But education is such a sensitive issue and such a sensitive subject. We are having a system where the PhDs have nothing to do, and it's really heartbreaking when I see a PhD, a boy and a girl of 35 years waiting for post-doctoral fellowship or just something to do after PhD. I'm sure the system has not been able to regulate itself in terms of quality, in terms of assurance, in terms of career and future of the students. Because at least something we produce, either we produce knowledge and have, after so many years now we are talking about innovation. Innovation should be built in if we are quality conscious. And I think it's much more than autonomy, which is required. I may not say completely regulation because if I say it now, I would be propagating maybe the UGC's role, but I'm a teacher basically, and I remain that. And so I also have a right to say about the universities and teachers becoming quality conscious. And I think the students and their parents, the stakeholders, will have to be much more aware now. And somewhere we'll introduce, which will be painful to begin with, but a regulation which is multi-pronged.
Okay.
Which is self also, but where the stakeholders also become part of it.
A multi-pronged regulation system, Professor Batabyal, is that the way forward, or do you still believe that self-regulation with some kind of an external regulator looking at the self-regulation closely is the way forward?
You see, I agree whatever everyone said, but they're still looking at a very technical, fragmentary manner. Now, you see, before 90s, we never used the word regulator for UGC. UGC was facilitated. It was a buffer. So why are we using the word regulator? And that's where my whole problematic lies. You see, who wants regulation? So we have to actually judge that. Now, when we talk about excellence universities, what are we talking about? What are our yardsticks? We have the Western universities and Western knowledge institutions, and then Far Eastern education institution. Now, what were our yardstick to measure our own excellence? Now, in most cases, and even the discussion will show, that our yardsticks become technical, very technical managerial institutions. We are not talking about a civilization crisis that we are going through. We have no good centers of social sciences, humanities, language, literature, philosophy. We have let them go down. Now, not a CIA, FICCI, ASSOCHAM never bothered about all these. But in West, in Eastern Asia, they are bothered about. So capital is also bothered about critical avenues. Now, UGC is a facilitator, and that's why I would actually champion its stay longer than it should have. And I think when they talk about regulator, they invariably talk about doing away with UGC, which I would oppose, because we need facilitator, because it's a huge country. Masses and masses of people after RTE, particularly in 2009 onwards, will come into the university system. Now, who will provide them? Who will provide them? State universities are doing badly, not just because of politics, but they don't have money. After GST will come, you see more and more crunch situation will come to the universities.
Right.
So therefore, regulation is not the way it was recently implemented, like architecture. Is taken away from a professional body to Ministry of Urban Development, which all know is one of the most corrupt bodies within the government system. Just imagine what will be the plight of professors or teachers involved in education sitting outside the door of the secretary. So this is to save this kind of situation where producers of knowledge in your own society, in ancient times, don't forget, ashrams were located outside the boundaries of the state, the jungle, it was almost the liminal area, so that they have their leisure to think about the society, think about the problem, think about the solution, whatever way they could. That's why they could write Upanishads,
Right.
And that's why they're less control. In that sense, I'm saying control is important, but not in the manner that we think in terms of regulation. The moment we use the word regulator, post-90s word, you immediately have a notion that somebody should regulate us. I'm saying no. We should have facilitator like UGC, and UGC is very much there, except that UGC should be filled with people like Professor Yadav here, who gives credits, who give respect to professional bodies, doctors, medical, teachers. That's what I'm talking about.
Professor Apoorvanand, let's take the discussion forward now, because education is an extremely critical aspect of everyone's lives, and we are all sitting here today because of our education, our respective educations, and it's so important for each and every person in this country. So how do we promote excellence in education?
So first we have to understand that excellence cannot be pursued in a selective manner. So you cannot have only 10 excellent universities or 10 excellent institutions of higher education. So we have to worry about the average quality. And in India, we have never discussed it. So our level of average quality is very low. And we are talking about creating excellent world-class universities. So you have world-class universities, 10, and average level is very low. It would pull it down. So that is the first thing we have to think about. Second, we discussed state universities, and most of our students are in state universities. The UGC rarely touches them, and it has to do with the state governments and the political powers that are at the hem of affairs there. So who is regulating state universities? Most of the state universities don't have the freedom even to appoint their faculty members.
Right.
So a university which doesn't appoint its faculty members is no university.
Fair enough. Yes.
So we have to talk about these things, but we tend to concentrate on central universities and central IITs and IIMs, and we forget the larger picture.
It's time to look beyond the IIMs, IITs,
yes,
and look at some of the
central institutions. We need to go to states.
Indeed.
And we need to talk to, because when you talk to states, they would say that we won't tolerate central intervention, and fair enough. But what about your intervention or your interference in the affairs of university? You appoint vice chancellor. When a political party gets defeated, vice chancellors are expected to resign. So what kind of freedom is this?
Fair enough. Professor Yadav, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to get quick closing comments from the other guests as well. What's the way forward?
I think excellence can come only when the teachers perform their roles as they're supposed to. because they are the most important. The students get what they're supposed to get from the universities. The governments facilitate as they're supposed to facilitate, provide the infrastructure, provide the pay scales, provide the respect, and the society also respects the teachers as they should. If all this combines, I'm sure we can have excellent education system here, and that should be related to our environment, our society, and the national needs.
That would be an ideal scenario, and we hope that we move in that direction. But Professor Sharma, your closing remarks on the program.
I think so far as the promotion and maintenance of excellence in the universities and higher education is concerned, two things are very much essential. One, that you must be able to attract the best talent in the country to teach. You must be able to have the facilities best to retain the talent. It is not enough to attract the talent, but also to retain the talent. And therefore, the infrastructural facilities, the research is very important component of excellence. And therefore, even in the social sciences or the sciences or engineering or medical, you have to provide certain infrastructure which is really good, high-class quality infrastructure for research. This is one. And number two, I think you can be selective in promoting excellence to begin with in certain institutions, because you may not be able to provide the same kind of attention to all the institutions at one time because of the paucity of resources. So therefore, you can have, say, 20 world-class universities, develop them, create a competitive environment between the universities and higher education institutions. And until unless you create that commitment and, of course, the kind of support to the universities, I don't think it will help to either remove the higher regulator or to have the regulator. Reorient the regulators.
Sure. And Professor Batabyal, please close the show for us with your quick concluding remarks.
You know, you won't like what I say. The latest world ranking suggests that Scandinavian universities and German universities have moved up in first 100 ranks in a big manner, in a large number. And the recipe is free education in university. Now, so therefore, cost of education should not be clubbed with notion of excellence. And that is therefore, what Nehru said in 1950s, excellence comes from the leadership's reticence, leadership, what is called sanjam, and less talk, and give this big thing to all the universities or institution. The moment you free the fee, you can actually see a sea change coming into the capital will move in a different direction. In order, their perception to open institution will give a new direction or take a new direction, and we can then therefore concentrate on larger things about excellence, civilizational virtues, our own classical sense of excellence.
All right. On that note, we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Rakesh Batabyal, Rajvir Sharma, Sushma Yadav and Apoorvanand, thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have. See you again next time.